They laughed when the janitor slipped on a spilled drink. One of the younger associates even pulled out his phone, nudging his friend, "Bet this gets 1 million views on TikTok." They had no idea that the man they just mocked was Daniel Carter, father of the company's founder, and the man who once led rescue teams through burning buildings. This wasn't just any janitor, this was a test. Across the marble hallway of the Everlight Dynamics building, the whispers were growing louder. Stories of managers mistreating night shift staff, sneering at cleaners, talking down to assistants like they were disposable. Something had changed in the company's culture, and not for the better. So, when Naomi Carter, the CEO and face of Everlight, got a call from Victor Lin, her former mentor and one of the company's oldest engineers, she listened. "You built this place with empathy," he told her. "But that's not what I'm seeing anymore." Naomi didn't argue. She simply leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes for a moment, and said, "I need to see it for myself." Victor hesitated. "You won't. Not as CEO. They know how to act when you're around. You want the truth?" He paused. "Send someone who they'll ignore." That night, Naomi made a phone call. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Feel like putting on some work boots?" Daniel Carter had been retired for 6 years. Before that, he'd been a firefighter and electrician, and later Naomi's rock while she built her empire from the ground up. He'd taught her everything, especially that you see a person's true colors not when they're smiling at you, but when they think no one important is watching. "I'm in," he said without hesitation. 3 days later, a new night shift janitor clocked into the Everlight Dynamics headquarters under the name Hank Morris. No one recognized him. No one looked twice. Not HR, not security, not even Naomi's assistant. Just one person in operations, Miguel, an old friend of Daniel's, helped slide the paperwork through. No questions asked. That Monday night, Daniel stepped through the side employee entrance wearing gray, steel-toed boots and a stiff blue janitor's uniform. He looked up at the building glowing against the city skyline, his daughter's name etched into the 18th floor glass. He wasn't here for revenge. He wasn't here to prove a point. He was here because something felt off, and when something's off, you don't wait, you move. Inside, the Everlight building was a different world after hours, quiet, humming, empty of chatter and full of shadows. "New guy?" a voice barked. It was Travis, custodial supervisor. Clipboard in one hand, Bluetooth earpiece glowing red. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "Name's Hank." Travis didn't bother looking up. "You've got levels 2 and 3. Bathrooms, break room, east corridor, copy station. Start at 3, don't wander, stay out of the west wing. That's its zone." Daniel nodded. "Understood. Don't expect anyone to chat, just mop and move. They don't like small talk." And just like that, Daniel was rolling his cart through the elevator doors. The third floor looked modern. Polished chrome fixtures, frosted glass doors, and touchscreen panels that were already smudged. He started cleaning quietly, finding discarded energy drink cans behind chairs, old food wrappers under desks. No one said anything. No one helped. He was invisible. Until 2 young men passed by in sleek hoodies and expensive sneakers. One snorted. "Bro, they're just hiring anybody now." The other laughed. "Probably can't even speak English." Daniel kept his eyes down and pushed the cart past them. But inside, he noted their faces, their badges, their tone, and the growing knot in his chest. In the break room, he cleaned in silence as a woman in heels complained loudly into her phone. "The deadline's fake anyway. Throw it at the interns and janitors, someone will figure it out." She didn't even look at him, just dropped a banana peel near the trash can and pointed. "Can you handle that?" The words came out like they were dipped in acid. Daniel bent down slowly. Yes, ma'am. By midnight, Daniel had finished the break room and moved into the east hallway. The air was cooler here, silent except for the soft squeak of his cartwheels. That's when it happened. A door slammed open behind him. Fast footsteps. Loud voices. He paused, stepping slightly to the side, pretending to focus on his mop. But his ears caught every word. I told you not to bring it up in the meeting, Rachel. Are you trying to make me look bad? You were just out of line. The man's voice was sharp, full of venom. Daniel turned the corner just enough to see. Rachel, young, maybe late 20s, stood stiffly near a wall, a notepad clutched tightly in her hand. Across from her stood a tall man in a fitted gray suit, his badge flashing. Dean Marshall, Director, Product Strategy. Rachel looked down. I don't care what you meant, Dean snapped. You're a junior analyst. Know your place. Daniel took one step forward, just enough to let the man know he wasn't alone. His cart creaked as it rolled closer. Dean glanced up, scowled. You need something? No, sir, just cleaning the hallway. Dean's eyes narrowed, then flicked back to Rachel. Don't let it happen again. He walked off, phone already pressed to his ear. Rachel exhaled sharply, blinked fast, as if pushing something back inside. Daniel approached slowly. You okay? She nodded quickly. Yeah, just work stuff. He handed her a small paper towel from his cart. Sometimes it helps to wipe it off, even if it's just from your face. She gave a faint laugh. Thanks. Name's Hank. Rachel, nice to meet you. He smiled. You too. That night, Daniel didn't go home right away. Instead, he parked at a quiet gas station lot, pulled out his phone, and opened the voice recorder. Tuesday, 12:17 a.m., verbal incident between Dean Marshall and employee Rachel. Tone, hostile. Comment made, know your place. Witnessed by me. Employee appeared distressed. He saved the file, stared at the dark screen for a long moment, then whispered to himself, You were right, Vic. They act different when no one's watching. By the third night, Daniel knew the patterns. He knew who took long calls in stairwells to complain about their assistants. He knew who walked right past cleaning crews without a word. And he definitely knew who noticed and who didn't. But that night he saw something new. He was refilling a soap dispenser in the second-floor restroom when a voice echoed in the tiled space. Don't even think about putting in overtime for this. You people cost us enough already. Daniel turned. An older janitor, Marisol, short, quiet, always early, stood frozen near the sink. Across from her, arms crossed, stood a man with a company polo and the smug confidence of someone who knew he wouldn't be challenged. Daniel stepped closer. Everything all right? The man turned. Who's asking? Hank, night shift. Well, Hank? Unless you're her supervisor, I'd stay out of it. I clean with her, Daniel replied, calm but firm. So, yeah, I'd say I have a reason to ask. The man sneered. Whatever, hero. He walked out shaking his head. Daniel looked at Marisol. You okay? She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. He does that sometimes, says I take too long on breaks. You don't? I time them, every single one. Daniel clenched his jaw. What's his name? She hesitated. Reed, logistics team. That night, Daniel didn't just record an incident. He started a spreadsheet. Names, floors, departments. Patterns were forming, and they weren't random. It was on Thursday that everything changed. Daniel was cleaning near the copy room when two interns walked by, laughing. She actually cried, one said, his voice full of pride. Dude, you sent the fake HR email? Yup, from the dummy account. She thought she was fired. They high-fived. Daniel's stomach twisted. He turned just enough to catch the taller one's badge, Caleb Myers. He pressed record again. Thursday, 11:03 p.m. Caleb Myers, an unnamed intern bragging about sending fake HR emails as a prank, resulted in employee crying, possibly harassment. He felt the shift. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. It was turning into toxicity, systemic, unchecked, even celebrated by some. And the deeper he went, the darker it got. By the end of that week, Daniel wasn't just the janitor anymore, not to himself. He was a witness, a listener, a mirror to the company's darkest corners. And what he saw was worse than Naomi had feared. He watched Miguel, the kind old technician who helped him get berated for a systems outage he didn't cause. He saw an intern crying in the hallway, clutching a folder while a senior associate walked away, smirking. He even overheard a conversation between two executives laughing about manipulating employee surveys. We just phrase the questions the right way. Makes everything look like a five-star culture. Daniel had enough. He started recording every night. Audio clips, short videos when he could. Even photos of mistreatment. His janitor's belt now carried a small mic, his phone, and a folder of names and timestamps. But it wasn't the insults that hurt the most. It was how casual they were. The way someone said, "She doesn't even speak English. Why are we paying her full time?" The way another flicked food crumbs onto the floor, looked at Daniel and said, "You missed a spot," then laughed with his buddy. On Friday, Daniel saw Rachel again, the young analyst from earlier. She was sitting on the steps outside the building during her break, staring at the sidewalk like it had answers. "You okay?" he asked. She glanced up. "You remember me?" Hard to forget someone who stands their ground. She smiled, small but real. "Thanks for that night." "You deserve better." "Yeah," she nodded. "So do a lot of people here." That's when she pulled out her phone. "I've been documenting, too." Daniel's eyes widened. "I didn't know who to give it to," she said. "I thought I'd just end up on someone's difficult list." Daniel hesitated, then said, "What if I told you someone was already working on that list and plans to hand it straight to the CEO? Rachel blinked. "Wait, who are you?" He smiled. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies." That weekend, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a USB drive full of evidence. He labeled everything, organized every file, took one last listen. Then, on Sunday night, he called Naomi. "It's time," he said. Monday morning came quickly, and by 8 a.m., the 16th floor boardroom was full. No context, no agenda. Just one line in the calendar invite, mandatory leadership meeting. Attendance required. The room buzzed with confusion. Directors, department heads, and high-level associates whispered behind tablets and coffee cups. Then Naomi walked in, alone at first. She took her place at the head of the table. Calm, cold, composed. But then the door opened again. Daniel entered. No mop, no cart, just jeans, boots, and a quiet fire in his eyes. A few jaws dropped. One person stood up halfway, frozen mid-sip. Dean Marshall looked like he'd seen a ghost. Caleb Myers' smile vanished. Naomi didn't say a word. Instead, she pulled a small Bluetooth speaker from her bag, placed it on the table, and pressed play. "You think you take the heat if someone slips? I'll make sure you're gone by Friday." Laughter. "Bro, she actually cried when she got the fake HR email. That's peak comedy. I don't care what she meant. She's a junior analyst. Know your place." The room fell silent. Then Naomi spoke. "This is what happens when leadership forgets the values this company was built on. When they act like no one's watching." She turned toward Daniel. "This is my father," she said. "He's not just a janitor. He's the man who watched what you thought no one would ever see." Daniel stepped forward. "I walked these halls for 5 nights," he said, voice calm but heavy. "I heard everything. I saw everything. Some of you treated people like trash. Not because they failed, but because you thought they were beneath you." He looked directly at Dean, then at Caleb, then slowly scanned the room. "I didn't speak up sooner because I wanted to give you a chance to show who you really are." Naomi nodded once. "Effective immediately," she said. "The following employees are terminated." The room held its breath. Naomi looked around, eyes steady, voice calm. "Some of you mocked, threatened, and humiliated people who couldn't fight back. Not because they failed, but because you thought they didn't matter." Then she pointed to Daniel. "This is my father. You laughed at him, ignored him, called him just the janitor." She paused. "He built everything you walk on." Daniel stepped forward. No script, no fear. "I walked these halls, heard the cruelty, saw the fear. You treated people like props, tools to use, then toss. That ends today." Silence. Then Naomi spoke again. "Effective immediately. Dean Marshall, Caleb Myers, Reed Walters, you're fired." Security stepped in. No drama, just justice. Caleb barked, "This is insane. Over a janitor?" Naomi didn't blink. "Number, over your character." They were escorted out, faces pale, eyes down. When the door closed, Naomi faced the rest. "If you're still in this room, it's because I believe you can do better. But make no mistake, respect is no longer optional." By that afternoon, change had already begun. A new anonymous reporting line, mandatory monthly floor walkthroughs for every level, including custodial and night staff, and a new rule carved into Everlight's code of conduct. Anyone who makes another person feel small no longer belongs here. A week later, Daniel returned. Not to clean, but to visit. He brought lunch for the night crew, sat quietly in the break room with Marisol and Rachel. Listened, laughed, shared tamales. Not because he had to, because he meant it. Upstairs, Naomi stood in front of the company, not in heels but sneakers. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about who we are when no one's watching." The room didn't cheer. They just listened, really listened, for the first time in a long time. So if you're watching this, ask yourself, does your workplace reflect who you are? Do you treat everyone like they matter, even when no one's around? Because respect doesn't come with a title. It comes from how you show up, and how you leave others standing.